Today's special guest is House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell. Rep. Driskell's a Tampa Democrat who took over as leader of the Democratic caucus in the Florida House of Representatives after the November elections. Stick with us, you don't want to miss it. Spoiler alert, dad jokes.
What we'll do in these next 2 years is just make sure that we're able to get our message out better, more simply, more succinctly, and really let the people know what's at stake.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by City and State, Florida.
Hello and welcome to A Deeper Dive with me, Dara Cam, senior writer at the News Service of Florida. I'm here in the Terracotta Room today, and I have a special guest with me, House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell. I just went over, Representative Driskell and I just went over how to properly pronounce her name, and then I totally forgot. So it didn't take long for me to turn the page. I'm sorry, but welcome, welcome Leader Driskell to A Deeper Dive.
Listen, that's okay, Dara. I'm just kidding. Hey, Dara.
I love it. All right, good. We're going to have fun today. And so let's get right into it. Democrats, there was supposed to be a red wave all over the country, and not so much around the country, but there was a red tsunami in Florida. You're taking over as the head of the Democratic caucus in the Florida House of Representatives. You're down, I'm not sure how many members your caucus lost in November, but can you talk to me a little bit about re-energizing Democrats and what steps that you think need to be taken in order to do that, if it can be done?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and to share a little bit about my vision. And when I look at the outcome of the 2022 midterms, yes, right, there was supposed to be this red wave, but there really wasn't, because young people came out across the country to stop it. And then even here in Florida, when you really look at the data, we saw kind of like that supposed red wave had its high watermark around I-10, we like to say, right? Like it was a lot in the panhandle. But I think what we have to do to stem that tide is to make sure that we are giving our Democratic voters a reason to get out and vote. And we did the best we could with that. But I think you also have to remember, this governor, he spent, I think, over $100 million this cycle on his race. And he also certainly poured money into state Senate and state House races. And so it was a challenge. It proved to be a challenge that was very difficult to overcome with the money that was spent. But on the other hand, I see hope and opportunity. And I share this with my caucus all the time. The reason being that I do believe that there's pride in being a Democrat. We're the ones who stand up and who hold the line and push for accountability and transparency. My caucus believes that every Floridian deserves the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. And we fight for that every day. And what we'll do in these next 2 years is just make sure that we're able to get our message out better, more simply, more succinctly, and really let the people know what's at stake. And then hopefully, without having Governor DeSantis on the ticket, might make it a little easier.
Yeah, getting the message out for Democrats has been a thing for, I can say decades now.
Yeah.
Many years I've been doing this job, and I keep hearing, I hear two things a lot. We need to build a bench, and we need to be better at messaging. I don't think that's changed. So do you have a plan on how to do that, or just stay focused? How do you do that?
Well, I think a couple things. The first, in terms of building a bench, I like to think of my caucus as the bench. We have some incredible and dynamic members who represent all across the state of Florida. And you see them go on to do great things like, county commission or, go back and represent locally. Some run for mayor. So, I do think that we're able to build that bench. I think Democrats don't always do a good job of giving ourselves credit for the things that we do well. So you hear me talk about, or you'll hear us talk about quite a lot, that we believe that every Floridian deserves the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. That's the way that we communicate our message in a more values-driven way. And it is important, I think, because no matter what policy issue we talk about, you can kind of wrap it up in that framing. And we need people to associate us with a brand, and that's how we're trying to do it. So healthy, prosperous, and safe. If we wanted to break those down into policy priorities, for example, the healthy, we fight for access to affordable, high quality healthcare. That's expansion of Medicaid is one way to think about that. For prosperous, we're fighting for greater affordability for Floridians. That's in terms of affordable housing. That's in terms of bringing down property insurance rates. And then with safety, we're trying to make our community safer and free of gun violence. So that's a very simple way of describing our platform, the issues that we stand for. And hopefully, if we can communicate those things more simply to voters, we'll be able to get it to resonate with them more.
Well, that sounds, because it's, I like healthy, prosperous, and safe. I mean, what's not to like about that, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, in a minute, I want to talk about some of the things that we might expect during the legislative session that's coming up. But before we did that, this week, this episode will come out next week, but this week I've been at former state attorney Andrew, or he still is the state attorney Andrew Warren's trial here in Tallahassee, a federal trial. He's fighting to get his job back after Governor DeSantis suspended him in August. And you're a lawyer from Tampa. I'm guessing you may be familiar with this situation. I just wondered if you had any thoughts about what the governor did and what Andrew Warren is experiencing as he's trying to. He's arguing that his First Amendment rights were violated by the governor.
Yeah, the governor's actions, it was so much more than just a suspension. The suspension is the net effect, but there's so much more wrapped up into that. What I mean is, this is a governor who is overreaching. And it's a trend that we've seen with him, where he is just so quick to substitute his judgment for that of the legislature, for that of the judiciary, and in this case, for that of Hillsborough County voters. So I'm a voter in Hillsborough County. I'm honored and proud to have voted for Andrew Warren. And he's done a fantastic job. And so when Governor DeSantis suspended State Attorney Warren, he effectively substituted his judgment for mine and the thousands of other voters, tens of thousands of other voters who voted for Andrew Warren. And so it's wrong. And, this is the same governor and the same Republican-led legislature that does not give our state attorneys' offices, or our public defenders for that matter, the resources that they need to prosecute and defend big crimes. So, for example, if let's say the Hillsborough County State Attorney's Office was prosecuting, they had a number of death penalty cases or capital cases, right? It costs a lot of resources.
They're very expensive.
Right? And it takes resources also to retain good talent. One of the problems that we've seen at our state attorney's offices is that a lot of the junior attorneys will leave after a certain point because they want to go and make more money in the private sector. And so then you don't even have the experienced prosecutors that you need to prosecute the big crimes. And so here you have a state attorney who's saying, okay, in my opinion, these types of cases, prosecuting women or doctors around abortion issues would be low priority, and I wouldn't want to prosecute those. There's a certain hypocrisy with the governor attacking him for that, because it's that same governor that's not giving him the resources that he needs to be able to, do you see what I'm saying? Right? Like,
Absolutely. He's saying Andrew Warren, and I've heard him say this yesterday or whatever day it will be when this airs. I heard him saying during the trial, I have limited resources, and prosecutors have prosecutorial discretion about how they want to spend those resources. So, right. And I mean, what's really interesting, and I don't want to spend the whole time talking about Andrew Warren, but one of the things that's really interesting to me is that he was suspended, the governor suspended him for saying that he was not going to enforce prosecute abortion-related crimes related to the 15-week restriction on abortion. But he never did any of that. He didn't, there was never a crime referred to his office that he refused to file charges on. So it's kind of like a prospective, to me in a lot of ways, prospective firing of someone who you don't really have the authority to fire. And it raises all kinds of questions about the balance of power and how what constitutes an action and what the response to that could or should be.
Yeah, Dara, don't get me nerding out, because I am a lawyer by trade, but who else is? And we don't talk about this very much. It's Governor DeSantis.
Yes,
he's a lawyer.
Yes.
And he knows better. And I think we all, I say we, who's the we, right? Like my members in the legislature, members of the media, as the watchdog institution, need to call him to the carpet on the things that he certainly knows better about. Any first-year law student learns in their criminal law class the level of discretion that a prosecutor has. And Governor DeSantis goes around and invades. He just completely ignores, let's just say, the separation of powers doctrine that we have as fundamental, that is fundamental to American government. And we certainly have it here in Florida's government as well. He had no business suspending Andrew Warren, just none. And he knows better, but he didn't do better, but he knows better.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. What the court can do to undo that. It'll be an interesting legal study. Speaking of prosecutions and courts, I wanted to shift a little bit to legislative issues. Criminal justice reform has been sort of at top of the agenda for the Democrats in the House for several years. And I was wondering if that's going to be something that you guys are continuing to champion, and if so, what we might see happen, and will you have to drag the Republican majority along kicking and screaming, or any chance of making any inroads on that front?
Well, honestly, criminal justice reform is one of the areas where we've been able to have some bipartisan participation. And that's what it's going to take in a term like this, where we're so deeply in the minority. And so we'll have to see. Speaker Renner articulated some of his goals and his visions, during organizational session. I didn't hear criminal justice reform as too big a part of that. So it's going to, in large part, depend on what appetite legislative leadership has for it. Mm-hmm. But I will say, that's an area where I've been able personally to be effective. It's kind of adjacent to criminal justice reform. It was a police reform bill that we got passed in the 2021 legislative session with unanimous bipartisan support to try to provide greater accountability and transparency in policing, and to honestly support our police chiefs and our sheriffs with the kind of, some of the authority that they need to make sure that, they're weeding out bad apples. And who would have thought that in a state that also passed House Bill 1, which was one of the nation's most draconian anti-protester bills, that in that same session we would get a police reform bill. So I'm optimistic that there's room for positive work that can be done across the aisle there. We'll just have to see what sort of specific policies stick and what leadership has an appetite for.
Thank you for that. Another item that you sponsored a bill, and I apologize, I don't know if it was just last year or how many years, to protect and identify, protect and save Black cemeteries. And that bill got through several committee hearings on both sides, I believe, this year. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why that issue is important to you, and if you think you're going to have any traction on that this year?
Yeah, this is an issue that is just so important to me as a Floridian, as someone who is from the South, and just who cares about this issue. And I think that no matter what your background is or where you live, we can all understand heritage and we can all understand the sanctity of the dead, which is why I think we were able to get such great bipartisan support. But it all originated with reporting that was done by the Tampa Bay Times, specifically a reporter, Paul Guzzo, and I commend his reporting to anyone on this issue to go back if you really want to, get educated on it. But it started with the discovery of, or rediscovery, I should say, of the Zion Cemetery in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a property. The Zion Cemetery was the Black cemetery at one point, because we had segregated cemeteries in Florida and also throughout the South. And the Tampa Housing Authority built a housing development on top of it. And it was kind of lost to history, but they built it knowing that there was a Black cemetery there. And so Paul, through anecdotal evidence, and then really went through like our archival evidence, and rediscovered the Zion Cemetery. And it just led to community conversations about how do we protect this, moving residents off the land, all sorts of discoveries there. And that led to the legislation that I sponsored, and to create a statewide task force to study the issue.
Right.
After 2 legislative sessions, then last session, we filed legislation to codify the recommendations of the task force. We got it through the House. It didn't move in the Senate. So we're going to have to come back this session and try again. But it's an issue that's risen to national prominence. In fact, just this past Sunday, or I know this episode is going to air next week. So this issue is
recently.
Just recently, yeah. So this issue has risen to national prominence. And in fact, 60 Minutes recently reported on the issue, and I was able to do an interview with 60 Minutes.
Wow.
Their overtime platform about the issue of abandoned cemeteries and around this legislation. So I also commend folks to take a look at that. I mean, the descendant community that they interviewed in Clearwater, where there's another very prominent, a couple of very prominent abandoned Black cemeteries. It's just amazing to hear.
It is really, you do have to take your hat off to the journalist who dug into this, because it is just, it just sort of shocks the conscience to know that planners would intentionally build over a site where people's loved ones are buried. I mean, it's really kind of almost incomprehensible. So good luck with that. Hang tight. We'll be right back with House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell.
Here at Deeper Dive, we want to hear from you, the listeners. We invite you to send your questions, comments, and feedback to our mailbag. You can reach us at deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. That's deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. Get your 2 cents in by sending us an email.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. Our special guest is House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell, and she is going to entertain us with one of her famous dad jokes. I hear this is a hobby that you're known for.
So it is. And I guess it started when I was policy chair and I would lead the briefings for our caucus. And sometimes you just need people to lighten up. And so I started telling these dad jokes, and they went over like a ton of bricks. And so then after like the second or third time, I was like, I'm just not doing this anymore. and I launched into the briefing, and the member said, "What, no dad jokes?" And that was all the encouragement I needed. So yeah, here's one for you. And you have to understand, remember, with dad jokes, like the worse the better, right?
Of course.
All right. I love this one. What happened when the math teacher gave out extra homework?
What happened when the math teacher gave out extra homework? I don't know.
The addition caused division to multiply.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
I can do better. I can do better. Okay, wait.
Okay.
Okay. So I love dad jokes, but I don't have kids, which makes me a faux pas.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. Wait, hang on a second. Hang on. Wait. There, that's the one I was looking for. I gave you the rim shot.
I like that. Thank you. Don't encourage me. It will only get worse from here.
All right. Well, next time we're going to open and close with the dad jokes. Welcome back to a deeper dive with Dara. Oh, I wanted to ask about the Stop Woke Act. And I mean, can we talk about racism? Can we talk about that? It feels like we're not, the whole framing of the Stop Woke Act, which restricts the way that race-related concepts can be taught in classrooms, higher education, and in business training. The premise of it is that you can't talk about these concepts in a way that makes someone feel bad about their heritage or to make them feel bad about their heritage, because that would be discrimination. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the whole reverse discrimination. That was a term that was used at one point when, equal opportunity or quotas were being challenged in higher education. I'm wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about the impact of that law on teaching history, on attracting people to the state, on making members of the Black community and Brown community feeling safe in Florida. Or am I just being over-interpreting the effect that a law like this might have?
No, I'm really glad you asked about it, because I think there were so many bad bills and so many just bad policies, hurtful policies coming out of the legislature last session, that this one, even though it was talked about, I don't think we fully help people grasp the impact that this will have.
I don't think so either. I don't think so either at the time. Yeah. I think there was like abortion, there was don't say gay, there was so much happening, so much, the social issues that it just, I don't feel like anyone really, and myself included, gave this the kind of analysis that it deserved.
Yeah. Well, even the name feels like an attack on the African American community, because woke is a slang term that's been used by our community for years. Just mean, be aware, be alert, pay attention to what's happening around you, politically, socioeconomically, et cetera. And so even the name by design, I think, is insulting. But when you think about the bill and its impacts, right, I'm concerned not only that we're going to prevent the accurate teaching of history, but that we're not actually doing the proactive things that it really takes for our nation to heal. If the goal of the Stop Woke Act, being generous to the sponsors, is to help America work through and move past some of its challenges with its racist past, the way to do that is not to pretend that bad things didn't happen to Black people or to Japanese American people with the internment camps. It's not to pretend that those things didn't happen. It's to say these things happened, and it's a both and. And the and is, this is how you participate, young person or corporation or whoever. This is how you participate in building that more perfect union and working towards that version of America, that ideal of America that we all want to get to. But you have to understand the past in order to plot out that future, I believe. And so when we deny the more challenging aspects of our history, we really are denying people that opportunity to participate in building towards that more perfect union. And that to me really is the tragedy of the Stop Woke Act, not to mention that I think it has diminished and tarnished Florida's reputation nationally and globally as a place for business. And I want businesses here in Florida, right? Like I want people to think of Florida as a great place to come and grow their business or expand their footprint, so have good, high quality jobs. I mean, I think as a lawmaker, any piece of legislation that we consider, we have to think through the impact that it will have on our people, right? And also, I think about the reputation of the state.
And I want to ask you, though, does it, I mean, in terms of, I don't want to be too mushy, but like, how does it make you feel? Because to me, I'm not Black, but I come from ethnicities that were discriminated against for many years. And I wonder what message it sends to Black folks that, we don't want to talk about slavery in a way that might make you feel bad. I don't know how you can talk about slavery, which is a part of our history, without feeling bad about it. I feel bad about it. I feel badly about it. And my family didn't emigrate into the United States until long after that. But still, do you know what I mean? I don't mean to sound shrill either, but it just like, what message are we sending to our citizens?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the perfect question, right? And that's, as a lawmaker, yes, I'm a Black woman, yet I'm also a lawmaker. I have to think about the impacts of this legislation. And so it's a tough thing for Black history. It's a tough thing for Asian American history. It's a tough thing for Hispanic American history. Like it impacts the whole on such a global level. It impacts diversity training that can be done in the workplace, right? And, America is just the best country. I don't want to be anywhere else, but we can't pretend that we've always been perfect. But the reason why I think we're as wonderful as we are is because we're always trying to get better. At least that has been the trend. But it feels like there are certain forces that are trying to pull us back, and we can't go backwards. I mean, we just really have to refuse to go backwards. And not accurately teaching history would be a step backwards. And I mean, it would even make our kids less competitive, I think, on an educational front as they want to leave the state or go out and compete in a global economy. How embarrassing would it be for others outside of Florida to know and understand our history better than we do?
Well, I think, I didn't mean to get too emotional there. I'm glad that we did get a chance to discuss that issue, because I feel like that's something that got kind of drowned out by all the other culture wars this year. I think the one other thing I wanted to ask you about was abortion. The governor's been pretty mum. We know he's got quite a grip on the legislature. We saw that with the legislature passing his congressional map. So I'm wondering if you have any sense of what the legislature might do this year or next year about abortion beyond our 15-week restriction that is being litigated right now.
Yeah, I've heard rumors that it will decrease to 12 weeks. I've heard rumors that they might decrease it to 6 weeks. I've heard that they might try to decrease it, no matter what, that it will be a decrease, that they may try to add in some exceptions for rape, incest, and human trafficking, which they callously excluded when they passed the 15-week abortion ban. So I think what voters can expect is some sort of legislative move to reduce and restrict rights further. And I think this is so unfair to the voters because they hid from the voters on this issue. They did not talk about it in the midterm election
No.
in any meaningful or robust way. And now they're going to cave and do what the radical extremists in their party want. And this is just so clearly against what voters in Florida want and just voters across the nation. I mean, there's states like Montana and Kentucky and Kansas, which are very red states, some would argue even more red than Florida, that rejected abortion when it was on the ballot in this midterm. And so to hide this from the voters, and then now after the election, likely in a special session, or maybe even during regular session, but so close after the election, to do this to Florida voters is something that to me is just irredeemable.
Let me ask you about if there's anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, there's one which is
Freestyle it. Now I want you to freestyle.
Freestyle?
Yeah.
I used to be able to freestyle rap pretty well.
But, come on, show us. Do it.
Nobody wants
that. Oh man, I do. I'm raising my hand.
So one other issue that I think voters should be on high alert for is permitless carry and rolling back the requirement to have a permit for concealed carry in the state. And I just that could not be, we could not be making a worse move at just such a bad time, because we're seeing an increase in shootings across the nation. And in Florida, it's actually not that hard to get a concealed carry permit. But what it does do is provide at least one layer of protection to make sure that we help prevent guns from landing in the hands of the wrong people. And so I'm very concerned about what I'm hearing, that we might move to permitless carry, because let's be honest, it makes our communities less safe. It makes our law enforcement less safe. And it damages our reputation as a family-friendly place to bring your kids for vacation.
It's one of those interesting issues because law enforcement officials hate that. They hate the permitless carry. Most of them that I've spoken to. And, and yet the governor and Republican legislative leaders are very pro law enforcement, very, affiliated, like to affiliate themselves with law enforcement. And yet I've seen a number of leaders endorsing the concept of permitless carry. I think that goes to maybe the clout that gun owners might have and the NRA might have in Florida and elsewhere. I think we have over 2 million concealed carry permits in Florida currently. And, that's a lot. That's 2 million out of a population of 21 million. That's a lot of people. We have right now in Tallahassee, I'm sure you follow what goes on in Tallahassee. We're experiencing the terrible gun violence in Tallahassee. So I think, thank you for bringing that up. I had forgotten to put that on my list of items to ask you about. I think we're about ready to close. I'd like to finish up with one maybe a little lighter question. What do you do for fun when you're in Tallahassee, or do you have any time for fun when you're in Tallahassee?
It's so funny because you asked that question and a number of thoughts jumped into my mind, and then you said in Tallahassee, and I was like, girl, I don't have time for fun in Tallahassee.
Well, what do you do for fun, period, then? That's a better question.
I appreciate that. So yeah, I'm an avid reader, so I like to read. I love music, so I'm always listening to something. I love to cook, and I love spending time with my families. Over the holidays, we just went to the movies and watched Black Panther 2 together.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
It's so good. And I think it's a major blockbuster franchise that had the death of the actor who's the main character, but I thought that they handled that so well. And it was just really fun.
Oh, that's great. So what's on your nightstand? What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book. It's called Atomic Habits. It's a pretty
Atomic
popular one, and I
Habits.
can't think of the author's name, but
Are
I
you
really like.
real book, hard paper book, or Kindle?
Would you believe? Okay, so this is one where I have both. So I have it at home, but I broke down and purchased the Kindle version because I travel so much.
Right.
I should keep this with me. So yeah, I really like the way that he talks about time management, and in this new leadership role, I'm like, okay, what can I read to help me prepare
Right.
for the increase of work that's on my plate? And that's been a really good one.
Okay, well, good. That's a little tip for all our deeper divas. Go run out and get yourself a copy of Atomic Habits, and if you have to get it on Audible because you travel around a lot, to me, if you listen to it on a book on tape, I'm using air quotes, I count that as reading nowadays. So I don't know. Some of my friends are very old school and they say, no, you have to actually read it in order to read it. Listening to it doesn't count. But I don't know. Where do you stand on that?
I think that people can be visual learners, and some learn, by hearing things. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay,
However
good.
you ingest information
Not
best. I feel
judging.
okay.
I think it's best not to judge. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me today, Rep. Driskell, House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell. See, I got it that time. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and I hope we get a chance to welcome you back again soon.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate it.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is a podcast by City and State Florida, hosted by Dara Cam, produced by Ryan Daly, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs LLC and performed by Ryan Daly and Danny Reyes.